Hello and welcome to the TTT News Special. I'm DK Rostov. Very happy to have you here. We are speaking with youth, and the Caribbean Regional Youth Council is the collective voice of national youth councils and represents the voice of youth for the Caribbean. We're joined by Kendell Vincent. He is a board member responsible for information and communication. We just had on the screen Krystal Yearwood, head of Strategic Action Plan Committee. She's also the lead in the Regional Youth Survey, which we will be speaking about in just a bit. We also have, rounding out the panel, Shamar Wedderburn, Training and Development Coordinator for the CRYC. And we say CRYC, so we have that in the basket already, standing for Caribbean Regional Youth Council. Now, we want to start off with you, please, Kendell, giving us a little history on possibly some of the objectives about CRYC.
Thank you for that. The Caribbean Regional Youth Council was actually formulated in 2013 at the Caribbean Youth Leaders Summit, and it would have been based more so about the coming together of national youth councils from across the Caribbean. So currently we operate within, we have 8 national youth councils as well as 1 associate member council. They range from Jamaica, Barbados, also includes Trinidad and Tobago, and our 1 associate is Martinique. So we have a wide variety of national youth councils from across the Caribbean. Essentially, what the Caribbean Regional Youth Council seeks to do, or what we aim to do, is essentially we are the coordinating body for national youth councils, as well as it gives, there's strength in numbers and unity. So of course, that coming together of youth councils to push and promote and propel the youth agenda or the youth development agenda across the Caribbean.
And thank you so much. I want to include Krystal in the conversation now, please, because in terms of being head of Strategic Action Plan Committee, how easy or what are some of the challenges that you're finding trying to plan strategically during a pandemic?
It has been definitely challenging, but the Caribbean Regional Youth Council does not stray away from a challenge. We are definitely tackling it head on. And the planning for the strategic action plan really came about due to the fact that we recognize that even within the pandemic, that CRYC can no longer just pursue its mandates aimlessly. We needed a strategic and direct focus on certain focal areas. And as a result, that's how the strategic action plan came to life, because we recognize that with scarce technical resources and financial resources, CRYC cannot be a jack of all trades, but instead we just needed to focus on key areas of youth development.
And I'm glad that you speak about youth development, and let's introduce Shamar to speak about some of those key areas that you're focusing on with regard to youth development. Thank you.
Right, so thank you. And if we can even just point out what's come out so far in terms of CRYC being strategically focusing, we all want to emphasize that at the very least we realize that CRYC has the potential to be a driving force for Caribbean youth. And so we have to be involved. We're always involved. In terms of those specific areas, particularly, and you'll see throughout this plan and our engagements, it may come through our membership development of activities, it will come through the policy and advocacy. There's always an activity in terms of partnership to strategically build our network. We have to build those members. We have to build the youth across every council and every country that we're supposed to be representing, whether this be by even media engagement such as this one. We have to as well look at sustainable ways to as well continue to mobilize resources to ensure that these programs can continue.
And from 2013 to now, Mr. Vincent, in terms of saying, and I wouldn't even call it blowing your own horn, because sometimes people see things happen and they think, okay, well, I wonder who's doing that, boy. But what are some of those past initiatives that CRYC would have been involved in?
So thank you once again for that question. I think our flagship initiative is that of the Caribbean Youth Leaders Summit, and that is a gathering of youth and youth leaders and youth development practitioners from across the Caribbean. And we would have been fortunate, and I speak from Trinidad and Tobago, of course, we would have been fortunate to host the last summit pre-pandemic actually, right at the Hyatt Regency, and that would have been sponsored and supported, of course, through the efforts of the then Ministry of Sports and Youth Affairs. So that has been the most consistent or one of our main activities that coming together, the Caribbean Youth Leaders Summit. Some of our previous initiatives that we would have hosted, of course, the training and development component, we provide a lot of training and technical support to our national youth councils. In addition to that, we would have, apart from that technical and training or components, one of the things is through policy consultations with the young persons. And through those consultations, we would have been able to forward that normally as well. In addition to the Caribbean Youth Leaders Summit, what would have happened in previous years is that there's normally a meeting of Caribbean youth ministers. So what happens is that the Caribbean Youth Leaders Summit feeds actually or directly into that. So, that is some of the ways that we have been effecting change over the course of the past couple of years.
And Ms. Yearwood, in terms of saying effecting change, to effect change, you need to know the lay of the land. And that kind of brings us to the regional survey. But what actually sparked saying this is something that we need to do? What led you to this point?
Thank you for that question. So as mentioned earlier, we were talking about the strategic action plan, which is my committee. So what we were thinking is that in order for ministers, for policymakers to have a comprehensive idea of the challenges young people face across the region, we needed research. And I think that policy should always be research driven. So in order to get policy that is great and is available for everybody across the region, what we needed to do and what we needed to implement is a survey which catered and reached across the entire region and caters to the needs of every single Caribbean young person. So that's basically how the survey came about, and is really deliverable 2 of our strategic roadmap, which also happens to be a multi-pronged approach into research gathering for the Caribbean, because what CRYC intends to be in the future is a global think tank for the region. So in order to do that, we decided that we should start with a regional survey.
And take me a little further down this rabbit hole, thank you, Mr. Wedderburn, in terms of saying, yes, we're getting the information, but where does that information come from? Because Mr. Vincent would have spoken about having eight national councils and 1 affiliate. Is it just these 9 spaces that you're getting information from?
Right, so thank you. So essentially, even though these members who are full members of CRYC, CRYC will also have associate organizations, also a region. Even throughout in our constitution, persons who do not have a national council established, if there's some kind of national representative body, those persons are also liaised on with. So in terms of our survey, we set a target of around 2,000 persons across the countries. And therefore, we aren't just limiting it to 8 countries, but we're trying to be extensive. As you'll find later when we go down to other deliverables in our program and in our function, we're trying to attach every category of youth, whether unemployed youth, at-risk youth, students, young professionals, entrepreneurs, because as Krystal said, we want to be a think tank for the Caribbean. And let me make no mistake, as we're on TTT TV, the Caribbean has brilliant and magnificent people. We want to maximize on that. Yes, we're in difficult times in the pandemic, but we want to reach every person and to hear their ideas. So this is even an excellent opportunity to reach the students and youth of Trinidad and Tobago.
All right, thank you so much. And we take a short break at this point, a natural juncture to do so. We are speaking with Kendell Vincent, Krystal Yearwood, and Shamar Wedderburn about the Caribbean Regional Youth Council. I want to know what you all define as youth when we return, because different territories may have different age groups and different criteria. So that's the first question we're getting into when we return. Stay with us. We are speaking about the impact of the Caribbean Regional Youth Council with Krystal Yearwood, Shamar Wedderburn, and Kendell Vincent. But I want to know, though, when we say youth, what we mean. Because people sing about youth man, there are things in the letter of the law, different territories will have different demarcations and parameters. So when CRYC says youth, what's meant by that term?
So what we understand as youth, or what we define as youth, of course, we have to be very cognizant of the CARICOM and all our member states within the Caribbean. So what we take as youth would have been young persons between the ages of 12 to 35, we understand that different bodies such as the UN, the Commonwealth, we have from 12 to 29. But what we recognize in some territories, and most recently right here in Trinidad, our youth policy would have been, introduce the concept of young persons being from low as 10 to 35. So what we try to do is we try to strike that middle ground, and young persons, according to CRYC, is defined as young persons between the ages of 12 to 35 from across the Caribbean.
Mr. Vincent, you hurt my heart down to my core. I realize that's not a youth anymore. Pressure. Pressure upon the kid. But it's all right. But in terms of how do people engage with this survey? In terms of where is it accessible? Where do people find it? Where do people fill it out? I'll ask you, please, Ms. Yearwood.
Okay, thank you for that question again. So the survey is available online. It's an online survey. It's an intense survey, but it's still not very difficult. Anyone can do it. I know persons have a thing about doing extremely long surveys, but we guarantee you that is not at all that long, but it is comprehensive, and we want to get as much information as possible. So the survey will be made available through your various youth organizations and youth channels. Like, we are working with the Caribbean Youth Ambassadors and other groups within stakeholder countries to pass the survey along, to get as many people as possible to fill it out, so that we really do have a comprehensive report of the Caribbean.
All right, thank you so much. Mr. Wedderburn, you spoke about deliverables. I want you to expand on that idea a little more, please. What are some of the deliverables that you see coming out of this?
Thank you. And it's an excellent way in which you asked the other question as well, in terms of how do we define youth? Because this deliverable working on the survey is actually one that addresses this idea. It's deliverable 2 is all about the development of a Caribbean youth profile. You just asked the definition for youth, and as Mr. Vincent said, we have many international standards or legislation for different definition of where we go. But what we want to recognize and acknowledge is that the Caribbean's youth do not have the same issues as youth in the United Kingdom or in Singapore or even in the Americas. So we want to as well say, what are persons in the Caribbean in a time when the world has a global health pandemic? What are they facing? What are those renewed issues? So the deliverables, answering a question direct, the first one, even as this survey is going on, we're in this process of assembling our research team, which will start out by assessing all these reports and studies that I've done over the years. Because I know you're going to ask us as the way, this is not the first survey done on youth. So we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to first analyze all the things that have been written so far. We want to say, this is a pandemic, a lot has changed. What are youth facing today? What do they want to see coming out of this pandemic? So this survey will as well be complemented by, and hopefully TTT will be helpful in sharing those later down. The survey will be complemented by focus groups with different kinds of youth of all ages. Just as you said, students, and students does not have an age group, so you might be able to come into that category. And we'll as well have stakeholder consultations, and another deliverable is really around concising the information together. And of course, a town hall to just gather and to consult and discuss.
Fortis Youth can chatty. But one of the things, and I do take the point that there are different circumstances that you find in the Caribbean that are unique to us. And even if you look at the fact that there are some spaces, some institutions of learning, say like the Mona campus, for instance, where people will be walking onto that campus, that tertiary institution, to edify themselves, and this is a space where enslaved individuals used to be. So that irony is not lost in that juxtaposition. But moving forward though, and yes, I'm going to ask the questions, and I don't know who's going to answer it right now. This is not the first survey. It may not be the last one. But what kind of timelines can we expect from this? Because it's one thing to say, oh, yes, we have a survey, it's comprehensive, it takes all this information, but many times, sadly, a lot of information is gathered and then it's kind of is on a shelf and it gathers dust, and the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So what can we look forward to from this survey coming out of it?
I think I would take this question. So for us, the deadline for this survey, it ends on June 5th. And we believe that a month is enough time to gather all the comprehensive information that we will need, but also it gives us enough time to compile it into a report, because we really want to publish these findings and publish this report on Caribbean Youth Day, which will also fall on the same day as our Caribbean Youth Leaders Summit, which is September 30th, 2021. So we're really working towards a final deadline to have everything achieved by September 30th, 2021.
Building capacity, what are some of those things that you see being needed at this time? And I don't want to say just off the top of your head, but in terms of conversations that you'd be having already. Mr. Wedderburn?
So in terms of conversation that we'll be having so far, in terms of even in this digital space and how the world is changing, we'll have to look at in terms of persons' mental health. We'll have to look at, we've been seeing so far a lot of persons discussing issues such as challenges at home. We're now seeing a lot more domestic violence and issues that persons are facing. In many territories, gender-based violence is now becoming more prevalent, or perhaps the pandemic has showcased what hasn't always been reported. These are conversations going forward. How can CRYC, through research and partnership, address some of these things? And a key as well is we'll be speaking about sustainable resources going forward, because every nation has been hit financially. Youth organizations have always suffered and always have to be, raising funds. So how can we set a sustainable model to assist? Because we have to assist every council, we have to assist organizations. So we're discussing that as well.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Vincent, in terms of, we have 3 minutes more, but I want to know who has the responsibility to do what? Because sometimes when you have an umbrella organization and then you have different chapters, sometimes the lines of communication and who has responsibility for what can lead to gray areas and hurt feelings. So how does that pertain with regard to CRYC?
Okay, so for the purpose of this Caribbean youth research, CRYC is the coordinating body. So of course we are bringing in, and I think one of the most important things to note, in addition to the core team, we also were engaged over the past month or so in recruiting young researchers or persons who are interested in research. So we are bringing on an extended team to support the rollout of this Caribbean youth survey. We as CRYC, or Caribbean Regional Youth Council, we would be the coordinating body, but it's very important to understand that the member national youth councils, the different stakeholders and partners that we have within the process, to ensure that if this project is to receive, its maximum result or achieve maximum result, it's important that every stakeholder, every partner, see their role and able to push it out. And it's not just, so in terms of the question as it regards to responsibility, we as CRYC would oversee, our national youth councils and our youth stakeholders would aid in pushing it out on the ground across the different Caribbean member countries. In addition, as well, the role or the importance of just the young person. I mean, we tend to look at organizations and, these structures. I think, it's very important for every young person or every person looking at this to know that their role is to not just fill out the survey, but fill out the survey, share it in your WhatsApp group, share it in your different spaces. And of course, you can access, apart from the platforms that Krystal would have identified before, you can follow us on social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook at CRYC Youth.
All right, thank you so much. And Madam Lead for the Regional Youth Survey, you have the final 30 seconds.
Thank you so much. So I just want to reiterate what Kendell has stated. We really want everyone to take part in this regional survey. Follow us on social media, CRYC Youth. We really, really, really want to get out there and make a meaningful and impactful change across the region.
Thank you so much, Shamar, Wedderburn, Krystal Yearwood, and Kendell Vincent of the Caribbean Regional Youth Council for the work that you're doing, and we're hoping to see big things coming out of this for youth, and youth in this term is defined for your purposes as 12 to 35. We also want to thank you on behalf of the entire news team for joining us to be part of the TTT News Special. I'm DK Roster. Have a good one.